In a world where so many of us are consumed about what's wrong, framed around issues of scarcity, concern around debt and entitlement, energy and climate change, my guest today, Peter Diamandis, has come out with a book saying the world is much better than we think. His book is titled Abundance. It's great to have you here, Peter.
It's a pleasure, Gavin.
So what is this? So here you are in the middle of everyone focusing on what's wrong, and here you are making the case for a world of abundance, not a framework of scarcity, where you posit that the world in its future is a lot better than most of us think.
Yeah, I mean, the work I've been doing through X Prize and Singularity University has shown me an incredible future going forward that's completely disconnected with people's, conversations where people are debating, should I have a kid? Should I bring a kid in this world? And it drives me nuts. And, people have forgotten how incredibly, how incredibly great these last century has been. Over the last 100 years, if you think about it, the per capita income of every human on the planet has more than tripled. Every nation has got healthier and wealthier. Our lifespans have more than doubled. The cost of food has come down 13-fold, energy 20-fold, the cost of transportation 100-fold, communication 1,000-fold. All the forces that have been making it possible to live these extraordinary life are only accelerating. In the next 20 or 30 years, I believe, in the work that I've done, the studies I've done, we have the potential to meet the basic needs of every man, woman, and child on this planet. And that's an extraordinary future to live into.
You talk about the rising billion.
Yeah.
The fact, as we move, this planet grows exponentially in the next number of years. We're also going to have a remarkable number of people that go online, that are connected like never before. 2 billion to 5 billion.
Yeah.
So what does that mean?
Well, it means that innovation, the ability for us to create new and better products. Think about the things we have today that didn't exist a decade ago. Ubiquitous Wi-Fi, Google, iTunes, Skype, two-way video conferencing, the things we run our businesses on weren't here a decade ago. And that's innovation. And innovation is the number of people connected, exchanging ideas. And the web is the biggest driver for that. In 2010, we had 2 billion people connected on this planet. By 2020, it's going from 2 billion to 5 billion. 3 billion new minds are coming online. What do they want? They've never been heard from before. What ideas did they come up with? They represent tens of trillions of dollars that have been flowing into the global economy as they buy stuff. It's an extraordinary future.
But you frame that not in a negative light in terms of just the lack of resources and the insatiable appetite for people to consume, particularly consume like Americans, and the concern about that from a climate impact and a capacity to absorb that, water scarcity, food scarcity. You make the case, though, what technology then will drive that capacity to work through those challenges? Yeah,
so in Abundance, I tell the stories and the facts that hopefully get people thinking differently about scarcity. I open with a story about in 1840, aluminum was the most rare metal on the planet. In fact, Napoleon III had the King of Siam over for dinner, and he fed the King of Siam with aluminum utensils because aluminum was the most precious metal back in 1840. Even though the Earth is made up of 8.3% aluminum by weight, all the aluminum is bound by oxygen and silicates. You can't go into the earth and mine pure aluminum out. It was so difficult to extract the aluminum, it was worth more than platinum and gold. Which is why, by the way, if you go to DC, the tip of the Washington Monument is made of aluminum, was built in the same decade. Then technology came along and made aluminum so easy to extract from bauxite, we use it with a throwaway mentality. And I analogize that to the fact that we talk about energy scarcity. But the Earth is bathed in 5,000 times more energy than we as a species use in a year. It isn't scarce, it's just not in a usable form yet. And there's good news. The cost of solar is dropping precipitously. And the amount of solar producing is growing at 30% a year. Extend 30% a year, we're only 20 years away from being able to meet 100% of our energy needs from solar. If you have abundant energy, you have abundant water. The Earth, we talk about water wars, but the Earth is a water planet covered in water, just as 97.5% is salt water. But there's amazing technology coming online right now to make that salt water into very pure, drinkable water.
You want folks to think big thoughts and do big things. Billion people.
Yeah, and I talk to CEOs and companies, and I talk to philanthropists who've made huge money and say, you're living in a time where your legacy cannot be just a building or a product. Your legacy can be wiping one of the grand challenges off this planet. solve food, water, energy, solve the diseases. That's where we are today. We have the ability to attack those things. It's the passionate, focused mind enabled by capital and technology. So people have to be willing to risk big to solve big problems.
So we talk about the rising billion and the capacity for people to connect in ways they never could have imagined any other time in human history. You also talk about these same techno-philanthropists in a very positive light, meaning there are people with this entrepreneur background that have made great wealth and are doing what? Not just putting money into investing in a library with their name on it, but doing different things.
Yeah, and I think there are individuals. I mean, the quintessential example is Bill Gates going after malaria. And there are people going after redesigning education, redesigning, Dean Kamen and the work that he's doing in water. I mean, basically, it's people who say, okay, I've been extraordinarily successful in reinventing advertising or reinventing, the buying experience online. I'm going to use that capital now to solve one of the biggest problems on the planet. And part of me is about trying to change people's mindset. And the work I do through X Prize is, how do you get these people to put their money as incentive to incentivize the world to solve the world's biggest problems?
Let's talk about X Prize. You started this a number of years ago, and most famously around space exploration.
Yeah.
What was the inspiration for the X Prize?
So I grew up, born in the 60s, grew up passionate about space flight, sort of drank all the tang that was out there, wanting to, inspired by Apollo and Star Trek both. And then figured out along the way that my chances of becoming a government astronaut were like 1 in 1,000. I had a better chance of becoming an NBA All-Star than I'm only 5'5" than being an astronaut. So I said, okay, how am I going to do this privately? And I knew how difficult it was. I've started 15 companies in the space world, zero-G flights, going to the space station, even mining asteroids. But getting people into space, really hard stuff. So I'd read that Lindbergh in 1927 actually crossed the Atlantic to win a $25,000 prize. And how cool is that? You put up a prize, you don't pay anyone who tries, you only pay the person who pulls it off. And when they do, awesome. The day before something is really a breakthrough, it's a crazy idea.
Right.
And so how in our society today do we incentivize crazy ideas? If you do it in the government, you try something wacky, you have a congressional investigation, right? In a large corporation, you worry about your stock price being hit.
Yeah.
And so incentive competitions. We were talking about earlier, you've been to our X Prize Visioneering, and thank you for your participation. And one of the groups that you were in was brainstorming an earthquake prediction X Prize.
Yeah.
And after this, I'm going to a meeting here in town with a company that might actually fund that. So how cool would that be if we had teams around the world figuring out how to look at the data out there and predict an earthquake, 15 minutes or 30 minutes earlier? It'd be transformative.
Yeah, as a former San Francisco mayor, I can particularly embrace that framework. But you've had other very successful X Prizes. I mean, from oil cleanup, Wendy Schmidt, Eric Schmidt from Google's wife put up money. You just announced the Qualcomm X Prize, which is extraordinary. And let's talk about Qualcomm for a second, because it goes back obviously to your passion, not just for Tang, Apollo, but also Star Trek.
Yeah, so I was on stage with Paul Jacobs, the chairman of the Qualcomm Foundation and CEO of Qualcomm, announcing at the Consumer Electronics Show this January, asking teams around the world to build a handheld mobile device that a consumer could use to diagnose themselves better than a board-certified doctor, or a team of doctors in that matter. And we named it the Qualcomm Tricorder X Prize after the medical tricorder that Spock and Bones on Star Trek would use to diagnose you. So here's the deal. We're asking teams to build something that any mom could use at 2 a.m. in the morning when her kid is sick. Or if you're trekking through Tanzania, or you're a tribesman in Kenya, this is a device you talk to. It's got AI. You can cough on it. It's got lab on a chip that will do the RNA, DNA analysis of the pathogens in your sputum. You can do a finger blood prick. And this thing has to be able to diagnose you better than a board-certified doctor, which, by the way, unfortunately, sometimes isn't too hard. Literally, there was a study recently done by the RAND Corporation that said 45% of the time you go to a doctor, you get the wrong course of treatment or the wrong diagnosis. Another fact, which scares the daylights out of me, I went to medical school ages ago, and I knew how much I forgot, like the year after I left. I never practiced, and don't ever come to me for anything. But by 2020, in the US, we're going to be short 91,000 doctors. We can't train enough doctors. So technology is going to come in and make healthcare abundant. Anyone has this will know, listen, this is a common cold. Stay home, drink fluids. Don't go to the ER, the emergency room that's already overworked. And so the doctors we have can be used much more effectively.
So where's the limitation on X Prizes? I mean, it's just a quality of imagination. I mean, you're going through visionary sessions or, imagining other X Prizes. Are there mega X Prizes in the future?
So, we've been thinking about that as, what could they do? Could they be used even in reinventing governance? It's something that you and I have talked about. And so, listen, I want to be very clear. Incentive competitions, X Prizes aren't a panacea. They're a tool in the toolbox. And I intend to find out how far and wide they can be used. I mean, one of the ones that I'm really excited about, Dean Kamen, who we mentioned earlier, is very interested in this, is a childhood obesity X Prize.
And Dean, just so folks know, probably best known for the Segway, but not as well known for 1,000+ patents, one of the most brilliant minds out there.
He is, and he's the implantable dialysis and infusion pumps. He's saved millions of lives in all his biomedical technology. Just one of the unsung heroes. He's the Edison of our times. Really is an extraordinary man.
So here's an obesity you're working on?
So a childhood obesity X Prize, to actually have teams around the country, around the world, look at how can we change this epidemic of childhood obesity, which is killing us financially and is really ruining kids' lives. So that's one. We're looking at potentially an X Prize in Alzheimer's, which could bankrupt this nation, right? We're looking at X Prizes in very low-cost housing construction, but we've talked about mega X Prizes in areas that are, one of the ones I love is organogenesis. Go from a skin cell to a transplantable heart, liver, lung, or kidney. So if you ever have heart failure, kidney failure, instead of waiting for someone to have a motorcycle accident and getting their organ donated, grow your own. I mean, that's the future that we have ahead of us.
And what's the limitation? Just the philanthropy to back up the prize?
So,
is that the struggle you have, or is it the ideas themselves?
So it's both. We have probably more ideas than we have capital. It's easier to get money. It shocks me how difficult it still is. Because, if I had $1 billion and I wanted to change the world, I'd say, okay, what are the 10 biggest problems on the planet I want to solve? Here's $100 million each. I don't care, who does it, because the beautiful thing is when you put up a prize, it's paid only when it's done.
You make the point, if you've earned $1 billion, you've taken risks, you've oriented yourselves around big ideas, and then it seems so timid to then start giving away your money in a way that doesn't orient around all those successful models of innovation and entrepreneurship.
So billionaires, if you're hearing this out there,
but when you can simply put something up, and to your point, only pay for performance. What is it? Why? I mean, I don't have $1 billion, but I'll tell you, I'd be front and center in this. What is it about that limiting belief? Or is it just people used to the way things have been done from a philanthropic frame?
Yeah, I think it is people used to the way they've done it and wanting to insert more control. Remember, when you put up a prize purse, you can't control who wins it. You can control what the end goal is, but it's not you giving it to this particular innovator or this particular university. It's up for grabs. And I really don't fully know, because it seems to me like this is one of the most efficient, highly leveraged. So you only pay when it's done. You get 10 to 50 times the amount of the purse spent by all the teams trying to win your money.
Right.
You don't only back a single solution. So if you're a venture capitalist or philanthropist and you back an approach, you back that approach. You put up a prize, you might have backed 20 or 100 approaches. One wins, but you have 20 runners up that are continuing in industry. So lots of benefits. So I'd love your help educating people about this.
And let's extend from that. Why not government then? Is this a solution to the Solyndra concerns, picking winners and losers? I mean, why isn't government doing exactly what you said? Let's put $1 billion up, which is nominal in terms of our annual budgets, to solve a problem as opposed to spending billions every year managing problems.
Yeah. So the government is beginning to do this, but they're doing it still on a small scale. There isn't large scale. This administration, Tom Khalil in OSTP, who really is really thinking about grand challenge work, but it really is about putting up very large sums. And Congress, all due respect to Congress, therefore can't direct which district it goes into.
Yeah.
And it's money that is, if it's okay if it's $500,000 or $1 million, but put up a $10 million or $100 million prize, and then you're losing control.
Yeah, and there's a website, challenge.gov, that has some of these smaller.
But how small are they, right? They're 50,000, they're 100,000.
And they're not creating the kind of energy that needs to be created. Look, in the closing moments here, you're bullish about America's ability to compete in this globalized environment with the merger of IT and globalization. America's best days are ahead of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about, go and ask anyone around the world, what are the hottest IT products and services? They're all, with the exception of Skype, you know, all of them are US born. We still have the mindset. America still, despite itself sometimes, still has the mindset of risk-taking. And you know, to drive a true breakthrough requires extraordinary risk. Risk to reputation, risk to your capital, risk to everything you've created, because that's what it takes to have a real breakthrough. And so America still has that. Others are beginning to catch up, but I think we still have a solid lead if the regulatory world doesn't get in the way.
At risk of extending our time beyond that which was set aside, Peter, thank you.
My pleasure.
Finally, as we often do, we'll close the show with some thoughts on today's guest. And while people like Elon and Peter inspire us to believe we can develop the tools for a better future.